Hi, and welcome to On the Spot. My name is Ronnie Wiley. To my left, you may not know him, but you've read about him and read a lot of things from him. Grady Tate, sports editor of the News Examiner. Grady, how are you, sir?
Nice to be here.
Good. Glad to have you on the spot. You know, we've covered a lot of sports together. Well, actually,
We have.
you covered it, and we've had lots of chats. It's good to do this in front of everyone to kind of chat what we talked about before. But first, we know you as the sports guru of the News Examiner. Let's talk about Grady Tate, where you're from, and what got you to Connersville.
I'm actually, I was born in Pico Rivera, California, lived there until I was about 14. Then my dad packed us up, moved us to Kansas, and now here I am in Indiana. And the joke is that as I get older, it seems that I keep moving farther east. So I figure in about 10 years, I'll be living in Maine somewhere.
Right, yeah, right. yeah. So, again, tell me about life in California. You lived there, what, so about 15 years?
Yeah, it's not a whole lot to remember. You know, it was really warm all the time. Got to go to the beach, you know, all the time, and you know, I enjoyed it. When my father was moving us back to Kansas, I told him, I said, you know, first chance I get, I'm going back to California. I don't want to live in some podunk little town in Kansas. And I got to tell you, I wouldn't go back to California now. If you paid me and made me a rich man, I wouldn't go back. I mean, I've become a small town kid, and I just love it. I love the smaller towns, slower. Yeah,
you talk about that. You talked about the podunk town of Kansas. A lot of people may say Connersville is a podunk town. And in some ways we are. I mean, I come from Dayton. That's where I'm originally from. I'm a transplant too. But what, you know, you talk about not going back to California. What do you like about the small town?
I like how everyone treats everyone in the smaller towns. I like the attitudes that everybody has, and it's just slower pace, and you know, people let you in when you're got your car and you're driving and you need to cut in, people let you cut in and stuff like that. You don't, even now you don't see that in Indianapolis, Cincinnati, the big cities. So
no, not at all. Yeah,
just little things like that, it all adds up.
You don't get yelled at, or
absolutely.
You know, I've seen finger gestures whenever you. And again, this is a laid-back town. This is one of those towns that a lot of people that I know that from Ohio that come to visit, they're like, "Gosh, we like this small town charm."
Yeah.
We like to, and that's what keeps me here as well. So you are a sports journalist.
Correct.
Now, when you got into journalism, was it something that you wanted to hit? Was it sports, or was it all journalism?
I've always been a sports fan. Ever since I was a little kid, I was a sports fan. And even living in California, I was a Cincinnati Reds fan, specifically. Wow. My first memory of really sports in general was the 75 World Series, Carlton Fisk waving that ball in fair in the 75 World Series. One of my first memories. Yeah. And of course, Reds win that World Series. And I'm a firm believer that if you become a sports fan, whatever team is the best team
at that time,
that's the team you gravitate to. So I've been a Reds fan since I was a little boy.
Wow.
But I knew I was smart enough at a young age to know that I could never really play baseball on a major league level. I was smart enough to know that. So, you know, I always wondered how could I stay connected to it. And even as a youngster, I started writing stories on my mom and dad's typewriter. I'd watch a baseball game and I'd take notes of it. And then I'd go, and they had those typewriters that weighs about the same as a Toyota.
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah.
And they had the black and red ribbon, and you could actually see the characters.
Right, yeah.
So I would crank out stories, and then, you know, I moved one time and I found a bunch of those stories. They were terrible.
Oh, right.
Absolutely terrible.
Right.
But I mean, you could see that it was, you know, a 12, 13-year-old boy trying.
Right.
So I've always been into writing sports, and even when I was in gym class, if I was too sick to actually participate in gym, didn't feel well, I would sit up there and I would take notes of gym class, of what was going on in gym class. So I've always done this. And so I always wanted to be a journalist, but I ended up going into the Navy right out of high school. Instead,
thanks for your service.
I appreciate that. I went into the Navy, spent 4 years in the Navy, and even when I was in the Navy, when we would go to foreign countries and visit them, we would always, like, give you an example. When we went to Italy, we put a little soccer team together and we played against the Italian national team.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
It was kind of a goodwill thing.
Right.
United States Navy team against the Italian nationals. They destroyed us, of course. But for the ship's newspaper, I would go with the team and I would cover that for the ship's newspaper, and then come back and write that story. So I've always been dabbling in it, so to speak. And then I went ahead on my last leave to Kansas. I enrolled at the University of Kansas because at that time they had the #2 school of journalism in the country.
Oh, really?
It was the
Wow.
William Allen White School of Journalism,
Yeah.
and word was if you went through the William Allen White School of Journalism, you basically wrote your own ticket.
Oh,
you
wow.
know. So I enrolled at KU, and then went back for my last tour with the Navy, and we were overseas at the time that it was time for me to get out, and so they flew me off the ship to Rota, Spain, and then from Rota, Spain, they flew me across the Atlantic to Dover, Delaware, and then I went down to Norfolk. And when you get out that way, you hand carry your orders, all right?
Right.
So I had all my separations papers and my orders, and I handed it to them in Norfolk, and they asked, "Where is your separations physical?" Because you have to have a separations physical to get out of the military, so that you can't come back later on saying I lost all my hearing in the Navy and I was suing the government.
Right.
So they check you out pretty thorough, and they forgot to put that separations physical in my file, so they couldn't let me out. So rather than contact the ship and have the physical put on a plane and flown over here, they waited for the ship to come back to port
Oh,
from overseas. So I ended up, long story short, I ended up staying in the Navy about 3 or 4 months longer than I was supposed to.
Wow.
And there was a very narrow window between me getting out of the Navy and starting classes at Kansas.
Right.
So basically I was dropped from all my classes. My school loans were canceled. Everything was canceled. So I ended up not going to KU. And instead of following that up and going next semester at Kansas, I don't know, life got in the way and I took a job and I just started living my life normally. So as it turned out, I never did go to the University of Kansas.
Did you get a job in journalism, or was it just a regular
I
job?
didn't actually. I've sold insurance door to door.
Wow.
I have welded. I'm a certified welder.
Wow.
I went to welding school and got a certification in welding. I've been a bookkeeper for a lumber company for 5 years. I mean, I did all the did all the jobs that would come around. And,
All the while still writing, I'm assuming.
and no, I kind of got away from writing for a while, until in Chinook, Kansas, where I was living, they ran an ad in the paper for a sports editor, and so I walked in right off the street, and I said, "I see you're looking for a sports editor. I'm here to tell you, I'm not that guy, but I would love to write sports for you." And I told them a little bit about me writing for the ship's newspaper and stuff like that. So they put me on as a stringer. And for those who don't know, a stringer is basically a person they hire on contract, and
Right.
they just give you certain games to cover, and you cover the games, you write the story, and that's it. And they pay you so much per story.
Right.
Okay. So they put me on as a stringer, and I did that for, I'm trying to think, 2 years. I think it was 2 years I did stringer work, in addition to my bookkeeping job with the lumber company. And then the editor's job, which had been filled,
Became open again?
became open again. And over those 2 years that I was a writer, I kind of kept my eye out and watched how papers were laid out, watched how things were done, and I soaked up a lot of stuff. So when that job came open again, I said, you know what? Throw my name in the hat. Let's see what happens. So I threw my name in the hat, and 2 weeks later, I got a call asking if I wanted to be sports editor for the paper in Chinook. So that lasted for, I think, 2 years. I spent 2 years doing that. And then during that time, I met my wife, and we'll talk about that. That's how I got to Indiana. But I met my wife, and she had gotten a job at a local radio station as a news editor or a news director. And they came to her and asked her, what would it take to get Grady to come be sports director at the radio station? And so she asked me, and I went in and talked to him, and I ended up leaving the newspaper and doing sports director for the newspaper. And we had our own morning show, the TNT morning show, husband and wife morning show. It was a blast, a lot of fun. Except I wasn't a morning person, so I wasn't as good at it as she was.
Right.
Not nearly as good at it.
Yeah, exactly.
But the radio station was kind of that radio station was in a flux where they were constantly changing formats.
Right.
And eventually they changed the formats again and did away with our morning show. So we decided it was time to go, and that's when we moved to Indiana.
Wow. So I mean, you have experience writing for radio, which is a little bit different than obviously writing.
The biggest difference with radio and newspaper is with newspaper, you do a lot of your work after the game
Right.
because obviously you watch the game and then
Right.
you go and write about it.
Right.
With radio, it's kind of flipped the opposite. You do
Right.
a lot of your work before the game,
Right.
getting to know who plays what
Right.
position they play, who does that. Radio, the good thing about radio is when you flip that switch off at the end of the game, you're done.
Right.
You're pretty much
Right.
done.
Yeah.
But with newspaper, obviously, it's on the other end. So.
Right. Right. So so you guys, okay, we're out of here. How did you hear about the job opening in Connorsville, and what attracted you to it?
Well, Debbie and I met online. We met online and we chatted for about 2 years, on and off, and then she came out to Kansas and lived out there for 5 months, and then we got married. Okay.
Was she from here in town?
She's from Liberty, Indiana.
Oh, Liberty.
Liberty,
Okay, so
Indiana.
yeah, well,
So,
she's still a foreigner since
yeah.
she's come out of as she laughs over there in the corner.
So she moved out there, and then we got married, and then after our morning show was canceled, a couple of years after she'd been
Debbie
out
was
there,
on with you.
Debbie was
Oh,
yeah.
oh,
Debbie,
that's right, news director. Right, yeah.
Debbie
that's
was
awesome.
Debbie was the other half, the better half of the TNT morning show.
That's right. Yes,
She's
she
nodding
is.
her head yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So after we decided, and I had not met her parents yet, believe it or not.
Wow.
We did that kind of messed up. That part was messed up. I hadn't met her family yet. We got married before I met her family, so we came out here for a visit. And when I met her family, and to be honest, when we saw Indiana, both myself and my children, we were all like, "We've got to go to Indiana.
Right.
We have to."
Right.
We just fell in love with the place.
Right.
Fell in love with her family. When you're with her family, it's kind of like a Norman Rockwell moment. It is.
Oh, wow.
It's
Yeah.
everything is just so perfect when you're with her family. So, so we had to move out here, and so that's what we did. We ended up moving up here, and I came out here in August of 2002, and I just started sending resumes everywhere. The Cincinnati paper, the Indianapolis Star. I mean, I sent them everywhere. Well, one of them went to Connorsville, and it just so happened that it was at that time that Connorsville was looking for a full-time writer. And so Mike Moffitt was
Yeah, I remember Mike. Yeah.
Mike Moffitt was
Yeah.
kind enough to extend that offer to me, and I took it, and haven't looked back since.
Wow.
I love Connorsville. I hope I get to do this. I'll do this as long as they'll let me. I mean,
Yeah.
I really do. I really love this community. There's so many things that people, I think, take for granted in Connorsville. Spartan Bowl is just
Phenomenal. You don't have that out in California. Maybe Kansas.
They don't have them in Kansas.
Really?
They don't have.
Yeah.
There's
That's the
not.
birthplace of basketball.
There's not a gymnasium. There's not a high school gymnasium like that in Wichita, Topeka, Kansas
Wow.
City.
And you would think that's the birthplace of basketball.
But they just don't build them like that. I mean, I mean, in last year when we, the season we had last year, you kind of got that, the rebranding or
right.
it all came back again.
Yeah. Oh, it was
So
awesome. Yeah.
it was amazing. And that's, a couple of things. Connorsville really, really does show support. I mean, the crowds that we took to the games last year,
It was amazing.
4,500, 5,000
Yeah.
people. I mean, people hadn't seen anything like that. And that tells me that there's still a lot of pride in Connorsville.
Oh,
There's a lot going for it.
Without question. And one of the things that impressed me is that the people from Ben Davis, of course, they're one of the biggest schools here in Indiana. They didn't even bring. I think we had 3/4 of the whole gym in Southport. It's amazing the support that we have, and I can see how someone, people who are born here, I guess, have a tendency to believe that, we got to get out of here. Those of us who come from different places in the country see it's not the geographic that makes Connorsville, it's the people.
Right.
And we saw that warmth with the boys, the basketball team last year.
Yeah, it was just an amazing reception. But they were such wonderful boys, and that's another thing too. The athletes themselves that I come in contact with here, they're just. I have no words for it. It's like they're my own kids, you
Right.
know. And if they're not my own kids, I wish they were.
Right.
They're just some of the best. I mean, I always tell Debbie all the time how the kids treat me when I go places.
Right.
I mean, it's like I'm a member of the team, a member
Right.
of the family, a member
Yeah.
of, and it just, That's why I will stay here and do this forever if they'll let me.
Yeah, well, they probably will. I mean, 15
I
years,
hope.
that's a long time.
I
That's
hope.
a lot of articles that you've written.
Yeah.
Do you have one that you stand out that you think, my goodness, this is it. This is my best one, and I'm trying to reach that.
I don't know that I could say it was my best one, but there's a couple of them that really stand out. Um, uh, I just wrote one recently of a young man who holds soccer tournaments and is raising money for um, raising money to put arms on kids who have
Oh,
lost
wow.
arms and stuff.
Wow.
And it's the stories like that, the stories that really are touching
Go
stories.
beyond the stats.
Right, go beyond the stats. Absolutely, absolutely. Those are the ones that you remember the most. And there's a lot of those out there. There's a lot of kids out there that mean that have those kind of stories, and I love telling them. I love being able to tell those stories. Sometimes the kids don't want the story told or whatever, and that's okay.
Right.
But any chance that I can get to tell a story like that, I just love that.
So you're a little kid out in California pounding on the keys,
Mm-hmm.
12, 13 years old. I know I've listened to some of my air checks, or actually my demo tapes when I was a kid, and I sounded terrible. Do you ever look back at that? You said you've seen some of them and you know it's by a 12-year-old. Do you ever look back at that and then sometimes think, wow, I have really come a long way?
Yeah, like I said, when I looked at those stories, and it was several moves ago, but I found a box and the stories were in there, little pieces of paper with the stories typed on them, and I looked at those stories and I go, wow, these aren't very good.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to be a much better writer over the years. And I got, there's so many people, that I credit with that. Mike Moffitt is a huge. Gary Hufford is another one who worked with me and helped me to become the writer I am, and just a lot of people along the way. So yeah, it's amazing. But it's just really neat to be living a dream, living your dream, because. A lot of people do things and they're working paycheck to paycheck, and they're and that's great, but they're not really doing what they wanted to do. And here I am. I mean, I had to go through selling insurance and welding and do these other jobs to get where I am.
Right.
But kind of a do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I always tell people that if you're doing something you love, even if you're living paycheck to paycheck, it's a lot better than not doing what you love.
And for me, it's not even really about the money.
Right.
It's not about the money.
Right.
It's about the kids.
Yeah.
I mean, people always say thank you and stuff like that, and that's another thing. I get so many.
We get that too. Fran and I get that too from the kids.
And people thank me so much and stuff. And I say this a lot, and people may not realize it, but I really mean it when I say the kids do all the hard work.
Right.
I am living a dream. I get to follow them around and watch games for a living, and it's not always pretty. Last Friday wasn't pretty,
no,
but
it's not at all.
But there are times when we go to the finals of a regional championship. There are times when I get to do that, and it's a total gift for me. And the kids do all the hard work.
Yeah, and you see them gel. You see the kids gel.
Absolutely.
So take me back. You are finally met Debbie's parents. You fell in love with the community. You get that call to come to Connersville. What is your first assignment? Do you remember your first assignment?
Oh wow.
But see, it's called on the spot, Grady. I put you on the spot for that one.
I am not sure I remember what my first game was. It would have been in September. So it would have been a fall sport, because I started work on September 13th, 2002.
Wow.
So it was 1 year and 2 days after the anniversary of September 11th.
Yeah.
9/11.
So do you like I keep a lot of my, well, it's not tapes anymore, but a lot of my air checks from radio, I keep them with me and go over them and think, geez, that was terrible. Do you keep a lot of your articles? Do you keep the newspapers, or do you keep the rough draft? Or
I actually keep a copy of every sports page. I probably have them going back 3 or 4 years. I would have had them all, but it just becomes so cumbersome to have so many newspapers.
Right.
You have to start pitching some of them. So, but yeah, I keep a copy of every newspaper, and I go over it every day. The rub on me at work is that I never read the regular part of the paper, and I don't that much. I really should do it a lot more, but I don't read the regular part of the newspaper. I read the sports though. I make sure everything's done right, and
Make sure those
Doesn't
kids.
always happen, but
Right. Well, yeah, that's what keeps us going is to get there.
see, that's the thing about this job. I mean, when you're working, say a factory job or something, you make a mistake, the people around you, the people at the factory know about it. When I make a mistake,
Every
10,000 people
right.
know about it.
Everybody know. Oh,
Yeah.
wait, Grady, that was wrong. That was 1994.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Or that was a typo. We see it. So again, you came here September 13th, 2002. A lot of things have happened in Connersville sports since then. We've had the Matt Howard craze
Right.
with
Absolutely.
him in high school, and then of course going to the national championships with Butler those 2 years in a row. Is there anything that you can look back on and think, man, I was privileged to be a part of this. Not only was I privileged to be a part of it, I covered it, and I got to see it up front and personal.
Well, it's hard to beat the Matt Howard thing, going to the national championship, and that was big because I would even talk to the kids back home, my friends back home in Kansas, and if I said the word Matt Howard, they knew who I was talking
Right.
about. Matt Howard, you know Matt Howard? I was like, well, yeah, he goes to school here where I'm covering. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, they knew him. They knew him even back in Kansas. So.
Yeah.
So
I know. I had a lot of my
it's
friends in Ohio.
hard to go any bigger than that. But one of the blessings of moving here is now I can go to Reds games whenever I want to.
Oh, that's awesome.
Being a Reds fan since I was little, this is big.
Excuse me. That is amazing that a guy from California was a big Reds fan. I can understand Charlie Sheen because his dad's from Dayton, but I mean, that's amazing. They peaked at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but gosh, you still had to. I would have jumped off the bandwagon if they were through the '80s when they had that 100-loss season.
I don't do the bandwagon thing. Those who know me know that I'm a Reds fan. They know I'm a Cowboys fan, and the Cowboys one year went 1-15.
Right. Yeah.
Their only win was against the Redskins that year.
Yeah. That was '89. If I remember.
And I didn't jump off. I didn't jump off the bandwagon with them. I'm a Lakers fan, and you know how poor they are right now.
Yeah.
So I stick with my team. I just do. You either love them or you don't. I mean,
right. Well, that's I should say that, and I follow the Reds through all that hard work and hard times, and the Colts this
and my
year
wife
as well.
my wife got to go see the Reds, the big red machine play, and I envy her for that. Well, I was in California.
Yeah, you get to watch them. Did you not go to the Chavez Ravine and see him in Dodger Stadium?
No, I was too young. I was little. I was little then. I was about 12, 13 years old.
That's true.
So.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
Well, now you're
too
dating
young.
yourself.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. A little
Yeah.
too young to be a Reds fan, but I did collect baseball cards. Shortly after becoming a baseball fan, I started collecting baseball cards, and so I got a lot of Reds, big red machine baseball cards.
So the community here in Connersville, it sounds to me like, from what I'm hearing, you have the best job in the world because this is what you love to do.
Yes.
And a community that accepts you. Connersville's taking a beating. We know that Connersville's taking a beating, but you're here to talk about all the positives. What positives do you see, not just through your lens, not through your, because I know you take pictures too, not from your writing, but what do you see, outside the box that makes Connersville what it is?
Well,
Special to you.
One of the reasons I got into sports journalism, because I love sports is part of it, but the other part of it is I don't have to deal with all the negative stuff. Rapes and murders
Right.
and embezzlement and all that stuff. I don't have to deal with any of that. They even have a term for it in journalism. It's called candy store journalism, because you're watching games. You're not dealing with the negative stuff in society. So that's one thing that really appeals to me about writing sports. And again, you ask about what are the positives I see. What I see with the positives are the athletes themselves and the way they treat me, the way they treat my family, the way they treat each other. I don't know what Brent Duncan is doing, but he's doing it right, because the kids at Connersville are just some of the most amazing kids. And remember, I've done this twice.
Right.
It's not just I'm saying this and not knowing what's out there.
Right.
I've been a sports editor in Chanute, Kansas as well. And
You've seen
and
different
and I'm not saying Chanute was bad, or they had good athletes too, but here it's a whole new level.
Well,
It's a whole different
I think
level.
it goes back to a lot of the coaches as well. We have some fantastic coaches. Kerry Brown, of course, comes to mind as well. He's a fantastic. I like him personally as a guy, and I think he leads his team in such a way that you need to be a good person. And I think again that's reflective of not just him, but also the parents as well. There are positives, and it starts with our kids. The one thing I would like to do is have them stay here.
Right.
than to go. So you know, again, talking about the kids and talking about the fun parts of the job. Is there anything that you think, oh, I wish I could change about the job?
Oh, about my job
Yeah,
or about the whole
the whole
experience?
experience, everything.
That's a good question
Because your hours are not 9 to 5.
no, they're not. They're not. Fridays are kind of brutal. Most people say, "Thank God it's Friday." For me, it's a little bit more brutal because I have to go cover the game tonight, and then right after the game, I have to go do Sunday's paper because I have to work first thing tomorrow morning, and I can't work on the paper while I'm covering the event.
Right.
So it goes Friday football, Sunday paper, and then it's pretty much straight to work again to cover whatever I'm covering tomorrow. So it's a long, long, long day. But no, the thing that I would like to change, and I would just like to see the teams be more successful. And toward that end, I want to write about the games. I want to do features on the kids, but at the same time, I want to do whatever I can to help the teams be successful.
Right.
Whether and from a newspaper writer's perspective, you know that you can only do so much.
Right.
But I have no problem running running briefs about car washes or whatever it is they're doing. Anything that makes a team successful, I'm all on. I'm all
Right.
about it. I'm all for it. I want to see the football team start having success.
Oh,
I
do
want
too.
to. I want to see teams that haven't won sectionals in a long time to win a sectional. Um, Currently, since I've been here, there's only been one team that hasn't won a sectional, and I don't want to. I don't want to put that team on the spot.
I can't think. Yeah.
I'm not going to put that team on the spot, but there's only one team that hasn't won a sectional since I've been here, and
Yeah.
I want that team to win a sectional.
Right. Right.
You know, I want these kids because they're so great,
Right.
and because they work so hard at
Right.
it. I want them to be successful.
Yeah.
And success breeds success, and if we start getting some success with these teams, then I know other kids are going to want to be a part of that.
Now, is that you talk about that? Is that what, as a journalist, what you would do to help us try to promote the sport to get more kids involved?
Absolutely.
Is that your...
Absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, there are situations where sometimes we have some of our best athletes still walking the hallways and not playing sports for whatever reason, and they have their reasons. But I would love to see every eligible athlete try, and see what that could bring us if we had every eligible person who could play try. To see what that would do for us. So.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, there are a lot of kids that I have seen over my years of being here in Connersville that definitely should have been playing a sport,
absolutely.
but for whatever reason, maybe it's grades, maybe it's home life, who knows? But sports is one of those things that, at least for me, it kept me out of trouble. It taught me so much about life, about teamwork, about working with other people, working with people that you may not disagree with, or that you may disagree with, but you become a team in that moment, and that's what's special, and that's what you see when you're watching and try to cover.
Absolutely.
You talked about feature pieces on the kids. That's something I would love to see. I would love to see more of that as well. Have you, other than when you talked about the gentleman who was the athlete who was helping kids get arms, what other pieces have you done that you can say that you're proud of?
There have been some athletes who have lost family members,
Right.
and when you talk about those stories, and they're able to tell you their stories. The article that I just wrote on Hannah Soper.
Oh yes.
That was
yes.
that was of course she was my niece.
Yeah, I was getting right.
So
Yeah.
that was a very, very special. That was a very special story for me to write. Wasn't easy by any
Right.
means.
No.
But Hannah was very special to me,
Absolutely.
and so it was a very special article to write. That one, actually, I got to say right now, is probably top on my list because it's so recent.
Well, it's so personal.
Still
too.
very, and it's very
Yeah.
fresh, and it's still very,
Yeah.
very fresh right now.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I was speaking at a church in Wickham, and some of the members has a girl that her name's Anne Marie. She plays soccer in Liberty in Union County, Emery, and she scored, and you took the picture of her pointing
Right.
after she scored.
Right
in
up to
Hannah.
the headline.
Yeah, and then the kids in Brookville that I know, they want to do something for her on the soccer team. So you've really touched a lot of people, and I was like, my gosh, I meant to tell you that last week when I saw you about that. So we're done. This is amazing. We touched on a very emotional subject. Grady, that 30 minutes went quick. Thank you very much. God bless you, my friend.
God bless you.
And keep writing everything.
As long as they'll let me.
As long as they let him for a long time. We'll see you next month.